A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today at the ISAS closed door session titled Geopolitical Cartography of the Indian Ocean and the Himalayas. To discuss this topic today, we are delighted to have with us Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, founder, patron, president, Geopolitical Cartographer, and former President and Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. This session will be moderated by Dr. Iqbal Singh Sevea, Director at the Institute of South Asian Studies, National University of Singapore. I shall now invite Dr. Iqbal to commence the session. Dr. Iqbal, please.
Thank you, Raghav. Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, Excellencies, friends, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you on behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies to this seminar entitled Geopolitical Cartography of the Indian Ocean and the Himalayas, which I'm delighted to say is jointly organized between ISAS and the Geopolitical Cartographer. This is, I think, our first event together, but it's the first of many to come, I believe. So I'm looking forward to more collaborations. The topic itself is very timely, interesting, and important. And if we just look at the title itself, Geopolitical Cartography of the Indian Ocean and the Himalayas, and we can perhaps, when I read the title, I broke it into two parts, which I found interesting themselves. The first part being geopolitical cartography. This clearly hints to the fact that cartography is geopolitical, politically driven. And I don't want to preempt any of the excellent comments that we are going to hear, but essentially it's a framing device. I suspect I'm also stating the obvious when I say that many of us recognize that states and boundaries of states are not natural, neither are the boundaries of regions. So I suspect this is something we'll be hearing much more about. And when we think about the geopolitics of it, we need to bear in mind that some of the contemporary conflicts that we are witnessing in the world are related to how these boundaries were drawn, how the boundaries continue to be contested, be they border disputes or water sharing disputes. And there are many examples that I'm sure we'll be thinking about. Now, the other aspect of this, you move beyond nation states, is regions. Regions themselves are not natural. They've been framed in particular ways. And here I look at the second part of the title, Indian Ocean and the Himalayas. It's interesting because the word South Asia is not used. So I'm curious to hear how we're thinking about the region. And of course, many of you may be familiar, just to show how we are entrapped when we think about regions, is there's a very famous magazine called South Asian Journal magazine called Himal, and in I believe it was 1996, Himal published a map of South Asia upside down, or as they point out, the right way up, right side up. I think that's what they said. But it challenged not only how we see South Asia, but how we think about regions, etc. So when I read the title, I thought about that. I also thought about I'm indulging in myself now, but when I teach courses, I often ask my students in the first course to just take 2 minutes to draw the world map. And, when you get like students in university drawing world maps, it's sort of like, they think, what are you doing, right? The icebreaker. The whole point is that, you think about how you fashion the world yourself and how you conceive of the world. So I think these are some of the issues that I'm really looking forward to. But apart from the academic issues that we are talking about, the very fact that we are now in a world in which we are conceiving of the parts we are presently in as the Indo-Pacific, it's also a reflection of a new sort of geopolitical recasting of this region. So I think that's sort of the culmination things. And if I can just throw one more thing out there, everybody is wondering what the new world order will be like. Some of us are suggesting that it will be spheres of influence again. And if we get to that stage of spheres of influence, then the region formation is going to be another contested issue. And I'm delighted that today we have one of the thought leaders of South Asia and the world, I should say, but also someone with diplomatic leadership experience who can share insights not only from his own experiences in dealing with these contested issues, but also as someone who's written about it and thought deeply about these issues. So and of course I'm talking here about Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, former President and Prime Minister, and one of the region's most experienced statesmen. So without further ado, Mr. Wickremesinghe, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It gives me great pleasure to be here with you for the first meeting between you all and the cartographer. What is the geopolitical cartographer? One way is to think out of the box, as we call it. because for us we are looking at the cartography resulting from the vast changes that have taken place in the 2 centuries. Between the Congress of Vienna and the Treaty of Versailles, we saw a creation of a new Indian Ocean order, where for the first time India, the Indian subcontinent, was under one ruler, the British Empire, Emperor, and the King of United Kingdom as far as we and Maldives were concerned. So that's one. You created one entity out of which also had its own repercussions in time to come. And then came World War II. That's the other one. And thereafter independence, from which we've now been trying to redraw the political maps, the dimensions in the Indian Ocean. So that's one. In doing this, from what we could see in our discussions was what was taking place in in the Indian Ocean was unique. It's a big, can you call it an ocean? It's basically U-shape, and the northern side is completely landlocked with this big land mass which juts into the middle, dividing into two, and basically make it two different political cultural orders. And what is this land mass, which are a number of kingdoms? It was never one united group till the British took over. But it was a center of civilization. The great religions that came out of it, Hinduism, Buddhism, the languages of Pali, Sanskrit, the North was discovered within that landmass astrology. So it became a center point of civilization which went both to its west and to its east. What is in the west was finally also diluted with Islam, but what is in the east is what all of us have, all the way up to Vietnam. Not only the present state of India, but even Sri Lanka, whose Theravada Buddhism went all the way competing with Islam at the stage when Hinduism, Mahayana Buddhism, and Vajrayana all were collapsing. So that's an order we have built. So we thought, okay, we call this a center of civilization. Then around it has come this unique order, which on the other hand, its northern side is also what was called Tibet and the kingdoms in Xinjiang, the famous Silk Road, which is now China. So you got the states of China and a state of India. So that's one. Secondly, is also within India, and at that time the whole political centers shifted from Calcutta to Delhi. From what we see from Sri Lanka, the shift to Calcutta to Delhi also was a great shift in the Indian politics. India and Sri Lanka were both influenced by Gokal, Krishnan Gokhale. And then when the shift came, there was also Gandhi's mass mobilization in India, which we did not follow for the simple reason by that time we had a legislative council with a large number of members, and by 1931 we had universal franchise. Gandhi didn't have that. But also what happened in the process from what we see from our end was that the center of political reform and agitation, which was Bengal, shifted with Delhi to the middle, and you saw Gandhi, who was from the west, Patel and Nehru from Uttar Pradesh. That became the center. And this big contest between Subhash Chandra Bose and Gandhi, and then with the partitioning it got into three. The western area got into two units, Pakistan and India, and the other unit became Pakistan and again India. So the Bengal really is the one that suffered and that went out of the picture, but it resurfaced as Bangladesh later on. So within this area is how we look at the geopolitics. Indian Ocean never had the concept of sea power. It was never there. Unlike the British. We had 3 instances of major sea operations. One was the Cholas going across to Srivijaya, but they had agreement also with the Kema kingdom. Second was the king of Sri Lanka, who sent one out to Myanmar to sort of clear the roads which sent the traders to Cambodia. Third was a prince of Thailand who came by ship and took over the northern part of Sri Lanka. Other than that, we've had no major, and all this was before artillery came in. So sea power has never played a role in the, as far as the Indian Ocean was concerned. Even in World War II, except for Battle of the Java Sea, your main place of action was the 14th Army in the northeast frontier, which had some of the worst battles which had never been highlighted. Nevertheless, so it's within these parameters that we have worked into it, and with this we look at the present geopolitics. How do you look at that geopolitics? Now, we look at it quite different from anyone else. We have what we call the 5 strategic states. That is Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives. We are the 5 strategic states. We are the ones who are there. And some call it the ignored states, because we are also ignored by everyone else, but we do matter. I call it the strategic states. So it's our relations firstly with India. With India, there's a big cultural, trade, economic relations. Even if the 2 governments, the central governments of all our countries cease to exist, that will carry on. That can't be broken. So we go on. So it's India's relations with us. Second is Pakistan's relations with us. And India's and Pakistan's relations with each other. And how India-Pakistan relations impacts on us 5 strategic states. Then there is China. China's relations with the 5 strategic states. Then China's relations with India. China's and Indian relations. China's relations with Pakistan. Now, we have to keep in mind also, well, on one hand, there's India's relations with us. Also, in dealing with India, we have to keep in mind China's relations with us and China's relations with India. It's a very, very complex. So this center is the one which basically influences both the western part and the eastern part. So one result is that India is going to play a very, very important role. What is that role? I think even in India, it's still being determined as to what it is. It's changed. And those roles have changed from time to time. We started with India and China together. Indi Chine, Bai was what came in earlier. Then came India versus China, with Russia also in 62 more sympathetic to India. Then you had the Bangladesh war, where Soviet Union and India was on one side, and Pakistan, China, US on the other side, going to the US-China friendship. That became another major issue, which in the case of Indira Gandhi was seen as hostile acts. And we also had thereafter Rajiv Gandhi, who changed it around. We in Sri Lanka are very appreciative of the fact, because finally he had to give up his life. But so at one time we had very strained relations with Mr. Gandhi's government. That's there in the Shah report, but it's a part of the geopolitics, which he helped the LTT. On the other side was Russia tackling the Taliban with the help of Pakistan and US. So that's then it came into a different scope with basically the SAARC, and I think Rajiv Gandhi made a major difference, and towards the end even Pakistan had to work with India, because all of us insisted that SAARC had to be there. Then came the era of friendship between US and China, now rivalry with China, and you find the present relations that have come in. So what matters is also what is the relationship that we have. The 5 sovereign states, the strategic states. In my view, ignoring the 5 strategic states means that you are not getting a real picture of the geopolitics, not putting our case out. But we all have the same concern, and in the case of 4 of the states, we meet very, very often. Then we have BIMSTEC, we have the IORA, we have IONS, we have the BRI, we have the Indo-Pacific, we have the BRICS. Our own history comes back from the Colombo Powers to Bandung, to Indian Ocean as a peace zone, the IORA 2017 declaration, the ASEAN outlook, which is what we take on. Otherwise, for us, it's difficult to understand what Indo-Pacific is. Is it an instrument which we are being used to tackle the issues that US has in South China Sea, not towards ASEAN, but in regard to Taiwan? So those are the issues that have come in. Then comes, if you look at the developments that are taking place, one is on the Western Indian Ocean, you find India is playing a much bigger role, and India is going in with, well, they had the plans with Iran to build the North-South highway. It all depends on what agreement Trump. Then there is also the India, Middle East, and the Europe one, again, which is stuck as a result of the Gaza. But India has got in there, and with UAE, there is a very, very strong agreement. Then UAE is also playing another role, which we have looked at. A lot of people have missed it. It's the Southern Council of Yemen. It's taken over the Hadramaut province. Most of the Muslims who have been in up to Indonesia has come from that province. You know that. All the traders come. So it gives UAE an advantage, just inbuilt advantage. And if you trace it there, so you find certain actions by the UAE. Then India has also come in with Mauritius. Then if you look at the islands, what matters is India, which has Nicobar, Andaman Island, Lakshadweep, Sri Lanka, Maldives, which are the key ones, then Seychelles, Mauritius, yes, and you get France on Reunion. The Djibouti is where you find the Europeans, but most of them haven't come out other than UK's attempt. But what exactly is the Quad? Now, Quad is not a military alliance, and that was said by Prime Minister Modi. But America looks at it as a military alliance. If you look at the Indian Ocean Strategic Review Act bill, which has been there, it talks of the military aspects of it. It has not been enacted, so I presume it is not official policy, but there is. So you find this happening. Then it's another thing, that is the China, how it has developed the Belt and Road Initiative. On the Western China Development Program, which you all are parties, what we see from our side, you have the economic corridor, but what we see from our side is the Myanmar-China economic corridor, which goes to Chongqing. Then from Chongqing, you go all the way to Central Asia. On the other side, you connect on to the Pakistan highway. So China has has access to the Indian Ocean, one on the Myanmar side, other on the Pakistan side. So on the borders of what we call SAARC and BIMSTEC with the Chinese. So that's changed the whole picture. And China has the largest economic clout. Their trading systems all have come all the way up to South Africa. So the way some of us look at it is China has encircled the Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean doesn't count to us. virtually they have encircled, they have built up political alliances. So in case there is a conflict, and none of the countries will say, with the US, no country will go against China. They may not go against US also, but they will ensure. Then it's only the Indian Ocean that is left. And the only conflict we can see China having is on Taiwan. And for that they have only got to get their fuel through. They know as well as anyone else that if there's a conflict, they'll face sanctions from the West. So there are no goods to be sent through the Indian Ocean. Whatever you have, you can send through the belt. If it's a short conflict, then there seems to be a strategy. And there's also a more build up of the Pakistan Navy with eight more submarines and 4 more frigates coming in. It becomes fairly powerful in the Western Indian Ocean. So in a way, that is what India has the biggest role, which we have all accepted. And that secondly, what we have said among the countries around here, okay, we will not do anything which is detriment to the Indian security. India will not do anything that is detriment to us. Then we have a certain amount of trade that's going on. The case of Sri Lanka, I have been asking some of us for better connectivity and more trading agreements. It also looks in from. So it's within that range. So if you look at that way, what is the advantage that the US has just by staying with the sea? China is coming on the land, India is land-based, and the fact is that you can't see India and China come into a clash on any of these issues. And you can see what we notice is that the BRICS will be playing a larger role in the Indian Ocean. It's South Africa, Iran, India, and Indonesia. And as developments come, Indonesia will be one of the largest, the first 4, 5 or 6 largest economic nations. So in this, we look at this, I thought I'd mention the background. It's in this background that we look at the Indian Ocean, the need for greater economic integration, especially in our areas with India, and also on this side with ASEAN and RCEP. How we do it is a different one. India seems to be negotiating on its own. We have done so on its own. So that's where the future is. But we'd like to see is to diffuse what is happening in the Indian Ocean, make it a maritime highway, go in for the, as far as, go for the freedom of navigation and freedom of undersea cables. That's one. Next one is the whole question of undersea minerals and the issues that come now. We have one with India also, but those are the issues that come up here. So we want to treat the Indian Ocean as an entity in which peace has prevailed so far, and as far as possible safeguard that. The issue of Taiwan is one that has come up, but it's very, very clear that none of the governments in the area can get involved to take a stand against China. We don't like, none of us like to see force being used, but on the basis of one China policy, they have very little. I don't think even you all have very many options. So it's within it, it's how we do it. The French, from outside, the French has played a role. They have won. The second is all of a sudden the UK has come back. What role you can play without air cover, I don't know. It can be a repetition of the Prince of Wales, because they'll be open to any attack by China. So it's mainly an issue, I think, of the parties that are involved in the Pacific. Certainly Japan. Japan is very, very crucial, and ensure that freedom of navigation is maintained throughout, even into the Pacific, which we are committed to. But this seems to be the present picture. How President Trump and his tariffs are going to work out is it's a big issue for Sri Lanka, it's a big issue for Cambodia. for Laos, even partly for Thailand. So that can change the picture in a way that none of us could foresee. But it's within this, I thought I mentioned, first give the background of our thinking so that we could start the discussions, answer any questions, so I could raise some queries from you. There's one question I didn't address, but that is important: the role of Singapore in Indian Ocean.
Thank you, Mr. Wickremesinghe. Please join me. I think you've thrown, you framed it very well. You've put context to some of the things that many of us are grappling with in various ways and in various dimensions. And you've raised a number of questions. Maybe before I start the discussion, I'll just take up one of the things you sort of ended with. Not the Singapore part, we'll come back to that, but the US part. What role do you see the US playing in the Indian Ocean? Do you see it continuing to take a very strong position on freedom of navigation? And so how do you see Trump negotiating the whole scenario in the Indian Ocean?
I think President Trump will be more pragmatic than President Biden. President Biden was to get everyone from Europe, the way we saw it coming to the Indian Ocean, which was President Trump has the on tariffs. I don't know what he will do. There will be problems, but on the power balance. But let me be very clear. I think US has a key role in the Indian Ocean, but they have to identify what that role is, which they have done. If they go into a power struggle with rivalry with China, commercially, politically, yes. But if you try to go militarily in relation to Taiwan, it's going to be a different issue. So they should. That's a part of the issue lies not within the Indian Ocean, outside. If there is no big military contest, I think the US should be there, and China will not have the ability to take on the countries in regard to freedom of navigation. Secondly, China doesn't require it. China's military policy, the way we see it, is not going to have their navy operating, the PLA navy operating in the Indian Ocean. They will try to dominate the areas they want in and around China. Because what we don't like, we don't agree, and that's been a big thing. One of the reasons is this dual-use theory of the Hambantota harbour and some of the other harbours like Chittagong. None of them is dual-use. We can, anytime when there's a crisis, stop the ports being used by any of the parties involved. And independent of Hambantota, there was the famous incident of the Chinese submarine which came to Colombo. China merchants who operate a terminal in Hambantota also operates one in Colombo, and next to it is the Adani terminal. So we may be called hedging or balancing or multi-alignment, but certainly, so that has caused a lot of issues because in the American thinking, and some of the Indian journals and all, we are asked that we have a dual purpose, that we are under the influence of China. The other one has said China has bribed the intellectual elites of our countries. And by the way, we are also working with Nepal. We've got a Nepal chapter also going now because the Himalayas are connected very much to it. But we've looked at the interest of Himalayas is where China comes in.
If I may take the liberty, because the issue of Singapore's position was raised, so I can look no further than Ambassador Keng Yong to share his thoughts on that. So please, Ambassador. Sorry, Sabo.
Oh, thank you, Iqbal. Anyway, this Indian Ocean is a very big territory, and all the Indian Ocean rim countries are important countries for all of us in this region. So it's important to understand the geopolitics as well as the cartographic features of this part of the world. I think what Mr. Ranil painted for us is a broad sketch. Yeah. Geography is now always critical for political influence, economic power. So the more we appreciate what is the strength of this particular territory and its potential, the better it is for us to manage the politics and the geography of this, politics and economics of this area. What is important for me, as is in my study, is basically that it is an important part of the world geography, and the big powers are not easily neglecting this, and they are also not easily leaving it to other people to interfere with whatever they want to do in this region. So personally, I'm still trying to understand all these dynamics in the Indian Ocean relating to not the littoral state, but the external powers in the ocean. You talk about United States, you talk about some European countries, now China, and even some of the other smaller countries. One part of the Indian Ocean that we seldom examine, Mr. Ranil, is that Indonesia is part of the Indian Ocean. A huge part of Indonesia belongs to the Indian Ocean, but we hardly hear anything or read anything about Indian Ocean and Indonesia. So for us in Singapore, I think it is important for our students and our policy makers to understand the Indian Ocean impact on Indonesia, foreign policy, economic policy, and the Indonesian psyche. Yeah. I don't think much have been examined on this aspect, Indonesia and the Indian Ocean. Yeah. So for ASEAN, Southeast Asian countries, I think is an area that we need to do more. Yeah. The other thing that intrigued me about Indian Ocean is that Myanmar is in the Indian Ocean, but they seldom talk about Indian Ocean. They talk about Bay of Bengal. Yeah. So, yeah, but Bay of Bengal is part of Indian Ocean, and I think increasingly there is an interest in what Myanmar is doing about their little islands, and actually there is an archipelago in the Myanmar waters belonging to Myanmar, but it's many small islands. So we studied that a bit during the time when I was involved in ASEAN. What do we do with it? Yeah. But I think maybe, if I may tease you, sir, how you see Indonesia and Indian Ocean and what they are doing vis-a-vis India, because India is always very dominant in their ideas and whatever they see about happening in the Indian Ocean. So this is something that intrigues me personally. And every time when I talk to the Indonesian about Indian Ocean, they say India is just across the water from northern Sumatra. Yeah, actually they claim that they can see each other, but not much has been written or discussed about Indonesia and Indian Ocean and India, Indonesia, Indian Ocean. So maybe I should take this opportunity to ask you, sir, maybe you can throw some lights from your own historical perspective, especially from the viewpoint of Sri Lanka. Thank you, sir.
No, we feel that Bay of Bengal is one of the most important regions in the Indian Ocean. Until the British came in, remember, the wealth was in the Bay of Bengal, not elsewhere. And still that is returning. And with the connectivity that you all are having with China, with Western China, so you could see the growth taking place there. India also, if you look at India, some of the growth, some of the fastest growing states are on the side of the Bay of Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, even Andhra. now getting to Odisha. So you find growth is taking place on both sides. Myanmar is becoming more and more complicated. But I suppose if you look at it in 10 years' time, it should sort itself out one way. Even Bangladesh at the moment is going through difficult phases, but at the end of the day, we feel that Bangladesh will recognize that they have to exist with India. They can't go outside that. So you have to give time for all those to sort itself out. But then, what is 10 years when you look at the way many other countries think? India's growth will come only about 2050, when from 3 trillion they can go up to 20 trillion or 30 trillion. So we have to look at it in that respect of where we will be, say, by 2050. Indonesia has an important role to play, but somehow or other it's not sort of stepping up for different reasons. I don't know why. President Suharto did have some of these things, but subsequently we haven't seen it. But it has the most important role next to India in the Bay of Bengal. The Thailand is, yes, it's coming in, it's taking its interest. It is the, okay, Singapore has a lot of investments in there, but you all play a very, very low key. Malaysia has, but it's around this BIMSTEC plus these 2-3 countries which has to get together to make a difference, I think, and that's important. If you look at Prime Minister Modi's proposal of security and growth for all in the region, security is one aspect how we work it out, but any type of growth would also require some of the capital to come from ASEAN side, and knowledge. Without that can't kill. So basically India at the moment hasn't got all the requisite resources for that, but countries like Sri Lanka, if we have more connectivity and we go ahead with trade integration, we can benefit. But then we are a small population which already has high per capita GDP. Is different for Bangladesh, but certainly I feel Indonesia has a role to play. And one issue on the Indian Ocean, 2 issues. One is what we've raised, how is BIMSTEC to work with Malaysia, Singapore and Indonesia. We had raised that. Will they come in, or otherwise will there be separate agreement on ASEAN basis, or those 3 countries? You have to think of it, which is going to be very, very active. And secondly, once we look at this involvement, secondly, on the overall issue of the Indian Ocean is that we do not have a viable organization. We discussed this issue at the India Foundation meeting this time in Oman, and I suggested, and I've discussed that later with Mr. Ram Mahadev and others in India Foundation, that we have to come up with a strong central secretariat for the Indian Ocean, and it's best be headed by a political figure who can then access the heads of government of the relevant countries. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult if you go at a lower level. If that can be worked out by the India Foundation, then we could certainly study that further.
We already have the IORA in Mauritius.
IORA is there, but IORA, unfortunately, everyone felt that IORA has not yet stepped up to the mark. So let IORA be there, do the work IORA is doing. But a central secretariat would also look at the political side, which IORA has not been handling. Let IORA handle what they are doing, then they have BIMSTEC that will come in. Others ASEAN. But have one which all these people get together, and there is a central.
Thank you, Mr. Wickremesinghe. It was a very interesting presentation, and like all good presentations, it made me think in many directions. So if the chair will allow me, I'll just ask 3 questions. One, I think it was a very interesting idea that you said that, in Indian Ocean there is two parts, and they have very different political and economic systems of their own, which are kind of independent in some ways from each other. Even in late 40s, when they were first talking about creating an Asian organization, this was a debate of whether to have one Asian organization or have these two. That tension existed. But still, the Indian Ocean, even today, has such currency. It continues as an idea, as a strategic and political concept. Why do you think that is? What is given the fact that there is clearly a clear divide on cultural, on economic, on political level on these two parts of the world, why do you think that Indian Ocean still persists as an idea? And now some people are actually trying to expand it to Indo-Pacific, even a bigger idea. The second question is about these strategic states that you talk about, the 5 strategic states, and the India-China competition that exists to a certain degree here. Do you think in the years you have seen that intensify, or has it been steadily intensifying, or is it something that has changed over years, and how does it change? And what triggers it? How much of it, in your experience, gets triggered by decisions that strategic states themselves make, say Hambantota Port or something like that? Or how much of it gets triggered by the tensions that are rising between India and China on their border, and then that's spilling out to other strategic states? How much of that kind of dynamics plays out in it? And the third question I have, it's an apocryphal story, because we are talking about regions here, but there's an apocryphal story that has been doing rounds for many years, that Sri Lanka many times considered being part of ASEAN, or thought of it as a Southeast Asian country. What are your thoughts on that? Is there some truth in that, of conceiving yourself in a different way, in a different part of a different region? Yeah, thank you.
Why do we think of the Indian Ocean? I think it begins, if you go back to history, of course, we've had relations, and countries like the Portuguese Empire spread from Mozambique all the way up into Macau. Same with the Dutch, but even earlier. Finally, we were all a part of the British Empire, and it was Mahatma Gandhi, who started it off in Africa and then came to India. There have been people of Indian origin of the old British Empire who have been in Africa, who's been here. So that sort of sparked it off. And also a large number of African soldiers fought on the Burmese front with the Indian soldiers. So they came back. We presume that obviously what the Indian soldiers spoke came into Africa and accelerated the process. Those are the pros. And the non-aligned movement. When we had met as Colombo powers and Bandung, it was to get Afro-Asian. And that Afro was more the Indian Ocean. It's later on Mr. Nehru went to make the non-aligned movement. It spread out there. But that relations has been there, and to a large extent. I mean, you take India, your connections to Mauritius, your connections to Kenya, your connections to Zanzibar. It's within it. How do we build up with Commonwealth? Other one that brought us together was the British Commonwealth. So we had this. It's how do you gel these together? That has been the issue, and you couldn't gel it together because of other problems, mainly on the continent. One was the Sino-Indian clash. Earlier, we were together a Sino-Indian clash. So that sort of occupied. Then secondly, the presence of America and the clash with Russia. So that became one of the major issues. How much do the strategic state know? Sometimes we also contribute to it. I would say Hambantota Harbour is not an issue to be worried with, but there have been issues. For instance, the whole one issue was the people of Indian origin in Sri Lanka. When we decided on the citizenship issue, even the Tamils voted for the bill. But I think this is the only way in which India and Sri Lanka was able to sort it out, unlike other countries. And it's worked out. We still had a residue of people who didn't want to go to India despite having taken the Indian citizenship. When I was PM, I said we'll finish it off, give them, either got to do two things. Forcibly, you got to put them into a ship and send them. If India doesn't take them, they have to float around. Otherwise, we have to give citizenship. So I said we'll give citizenship and finish it off. So that's one of the issues that were there. You had the same thing in Myanmar and in Africa. Second issue with us had been during Mrs. Gandhi's time, the whole issue of LTT, what happened there. But it turned the other way when the IPKF came, and finally Rajiv Gandhi took a strong stand against it. We know the consequences from there, and from then onwards, India has been very helpful in finishing off the war in 2009. But it spills over. Now look at presently the Bangladesh. The Bangladesh, Mrs. Sheikh Hasina had to go off. I mean, we are thankful to her for helping us during the crisis. Nevertheless, and you've seen now the other forces and the problems with India, but we feel that given a year or two, this should sort itself out. Very little that anyone can do except for this type of uprisings. They sort of, I don't know if you have heard the word papadang in India. That's when you fry it, it goes up, and after some time the whole thing comes down again. So that is what political events are in our part of the world. Of course, recently we had the Indo-Pakistan crisis also. So those can ferment issues, but sometimes what happens, Nepal regularly has these issues, but those are minor ones which can be sorted out. It's finally where India and China would come to, but with BRICS and all, there has to be some form of agreement or accommodation, because it's not a front. That's been the one. What is Sri Lanka? Well, are we a part of Southeast Asia? Is Southeast Asia part of us? Because the Buddhism of Southeast Asia's foundation is here. Then another thing is Ramayana, it's Hinduism. You look at the Hinduism in Bali, it's not the Hinduism we know, or you have in India or Sri Lanka. But there are so much of cultural connections. As I said, there was a Thai prince who came and took over the northern part of Sri Lanka sometime. So it's with certainly with Sri Vijaya. Sri Lanka and Sri Vijaya were allies against the Cholas. So those things have gone in. Then we were part of the Dutch Empire, so we went to Batavia. So these are there to a large extent between us, part of India, and it's how do we bring all this together? That's our concern. We have to do that, and what I feel is that Indonesia is the key country that has to decide what happens. If one of the issues which we have is that if the Indonesian capital is taken away into Kalimantan, what is the impact? Indonesia has always been, either Sumatra or Java were the kingdoms, then Dutch came and they had Batavia, which have become Jakarta. So that's played a lead role here in the power balance. So if you go into the middle of and go in there, what impact do you have? Will you lose that? Will Sumatra and Java build up its own identity, creating another crisis? So those are, I don't know how much, we all don't know how much that is, but it can even create a crisis for Indonesia, and it can dilute Indonesia's clout in this part of the world. But certainly, and I think there is a lot of connection, but it's how you come up here and how you get involved. I can understand at the moment things are the way things are in our part of the world, that to meet us as a group may be difficult, but Singapore and India are working, and we see a fair amount of investments coming into the southern states, which is natural. Same with Malaysia. So there is something on it. How do you formalize this and get along? We may not have big agreements like NATO or EU, but somehow or other we've been managed to get along without too much of problems.
Pushpa.
Thank you. Thank you for the talk, Mr. Wickremesinghe. Actually, I'm quite interested when you said that we consider these 5 states as strategic states and not ignored states. Why is it that we consider these states as strategic states? And is it only the perception on your part, or is it the perception on the part of the other bigger states as well? And has it or does it have any impact on the kind of relationship that these 5 states have with the larger ones? And perhaps it's a link to the same question when you said that I think you are also working something with Nepal. I'm interested to know a little bit more, if you could elaborate a little bit on more on that, if it's possible. What kind of a work that you are doing with Nepal together? Thank you.
No, we are strategic. Basically, we've all been part of one unit, which was under the British in different forms. Nepal was a protectorate, we were part of the colonies, India was a part of the empire. And without us, it's difficult for India. India can't be fighting us, we can't be fighting India. The strategic states. So actually what I think from time of Prime Minister Vajpayee has been a lot of us getting issues sorted out. Then India's role as the net security provider was also accepted, defining what exactly it is. But we do better. Neither can China go on fighting us. They also can't fight us. So we are strategic states, and we recognize India's major role there. But we recognize that US has a big role, and China also, and Japan. For Sri Lanka, Japan is very, very important. We won't go without Japan. So these are the key players that we see. For India, you also have to go along with France because some of the islands are there. But I've always said that Sri Lanka must also have island mentality, not only a South Asian mentality. So this is the way that we have been working. No, what we realized discussing, I mean, there are a lot of informal discussion that we have with even in Nepalese, Bangladeshis, Maldives. Then we realized that look what are the strategic positions. That's how this whole concept of strategic states came on. And later on, some of us had discussions. I went in Nepal. I think you went up to Nepal. They were here with Mr. Binod Chaudhary, who took it up from there. That it's the best is that we have a Sri Lanka chapter and a Nepal chapter to work together. Later on, we might have one in Oman. But then we get a full picture. Otherwise, we are only seeing one part of the Indian subcontinent. And of course, we see the whole Indian Ocean. But with Nepal, you see what's happening out there in the Himalayas. So we thought by getting together, and it's not only that we've been talking now with India Foundation on that side. We'd like very much to work with you. I think all of us should get together and pool our views as to what is possible. And so far as Sri Lanka is, with this geopolitical cartography is concerned, we want to do this, and then we are trying to move somewhere into the West Asia to have one there. But this is really growing, and as I told my friend in the morning, now President Trump has become a patron saint. He's changing the world order. So we have far more work to do. But we should, because in my view, Indian Ocean and this region is going to be the important one. And the growth will come there. Even China must come into this area. They can't do. So how do you hold it? It's a question for many of us. How do we hold the competing interests without without the tensions aggravating to a point where security is at risk? Within it, the play it has to take. So that's where we all have to get together, look at the different. I mean, you have a viewpoint which goes into the Pacific Ocean. For us, the Pacific Ocean ended somewhere near Canton. That's where trading ended. It didn't go beyond that. But you all are here. And actually, the Southeast Asia was a term that was first used in Sri Lanka for the Southeast Asia Command. And then later on, we were invited in '68 to join. But Sri Lanka turned it down. And now ASEAN becomes so integrated that it's not possible for any of us to come into it. But individually to have trade agreements, even with RCEP, it's essential. So whether how do we enter the RCEP? India most probably will have its own agreement. It didn't join RCEP, but it will have its agreement. We had applied earlier to come to an agreement with RCEP. But what we see now and what you have to take note of is the BRICS, whatever it is going to be important. And remember, sanctions against Russia failed because the Indian Ocean countries didn't cooperate. If you look at the amount of petrol that's been refined in the Middle East refineries, that's more than what is pumped out from the Gulf countries. Certainly about that. Look at the number of ships that are taking this Russian oil around. It's all operating from here. Russia in I think Indian rupee are convertible. You go to Dubai, they are from London, they've come there. So it's becoming the key area to look at it. We are in a way influencing world events more and more.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving such a good perspective of the whole place, historically as well as geographically. I'm originally from Bangladesh, now Singaporean, but originally from Bangladesh. So when you were speaking about Bangladesh, I got a little intrigued about the thoughts that you have. Bangladesh, as you have said, is going through a tumultuous time. I hope also it settles, as you mentioned. But we continue to have some, Bangladesh continues to have some problems with the Arakan and now the Chin, and as well as the northeastern states of India, which has not been mentioned over here, though Bangladesh has been with 170 million people, has been with the 5 states, but then northeastern states of India, which on the one side is China and the other side is Bangladesh, along with the Myanmar breaking up or going through another difficult time. I would like to have your perspective on that. As well as we hear that St. Martin's Island in Bangladesh, United States is interested. I do not know whether it is a matter of thought of some people, imaginary thoughts. Thank you very much, sir.
I don't know, but I can't see, frankly, I can't see US at this stage coming into anywhere close there. They are only looking at the whole, the major route only. No, Bangladesh is very important. I didn't deal with in length. It's not only the north. For you have to have your good relations, and India you have to have because the chicken swing. I mean, basically that's the most crucial area I would see. The issues on with the northeastern states is something that has to be sorted out. In a way, all this came out of the partitioning of Bengal. So these are carryovers from the British time, which has come in. Maybe in a better atmosphere, you should be able to do it. I look at these as things that will take a fairly long time. We are lucky because with Kachati we sorted it out. But you all are going to, it has to be done. But it has not led to a major clash. It's only a political issue, which I feel you could go ahead. But if you push too much, those states might want to have a separate identity together with parts of Bangladesh. So it's far better to, I think, sort this out. The Indian Union is now in place. Far as Myanmar is concerned, the breakup is more due to the internal problems. And at some stage, there has to be a change of government. And where do you go from that? Another issue is who heads the change of government. You all know much better, you all are more involved in it than us. Our one mainly comes through the fact that the Buddhist clergy there and the Sri Lanka clergy are very, very close. I mean, basically, so That's the influence we have is over with the clergy. It's a very, very big one. So we are also following it. But I think for my view, for Indo-Bangladesh relations is you've got to wait for the present situation to settle down.
There are about 2 billion people in the South Asia, approximately 2 billion people.
I know.
How do you see them growing, I mean, economically getting emancipated and not continue to remain poor?
One is we have to decide on our own economic framework. If you look next door like Singapore and Malaysia, you see what's happened, and Thailand. In different ways they've opened it up. Thailand and all very much on agriculture onto here. It is, we still have to get out of the original thinking that were there in the 50s and 60s. That is, we still have too many lobbies that are trying to protect themselves and bring this down. If you open out, I don't think there's a major issue of going ahead. India has done it, India is doing it. Started off both on the southern side with Maharashtra and also with Gujarat. But to what extent? I think my idea has always been that we should agree and open up, but I always find that I'm in a minority in the whole region, and sometimes in my own country. But that's a big decision for us to take. Actually, India in the from the beginning of this century, in these 2 decades, have done quite well, looking at it, what it was earlier. And it's going ahead. There are 3 trillion odd economy. PricewaterhouseCoopers says it will be 30 trillion, but even if it's 20 trillion, which is very, very possible, it's a big development to 30 trillion. So India will go ahead, but how we all get on to it, we have to combine with India for our economic development. If you do that, then the rest of the other part of south of the Bay of Bengal, the eastern part will come together. The real issue also that comes with the China-Myanmar corridor is the role of Myanmar. They are both a member of ASEAN and a member of the BIMSTEC, because one of the access the Chinese have will come through Myanmar. Other is through Pakistan. So into that.
But on the Pakistan side, it might become Balochistan. It's also that difficulty going on.
I know, but I don't think at the end of the day Pakistan has known its own art of existence. Chinese are also dealing with Balochistan, no, from what I have heard. But it's really, we have to look at the Bay of Bengal and how that comes. That can be a very powerful economic unit.
So the history is also now working against us, because it's one of the oldest civilizations, and you have, as you rightly pointed out, both Buddhism, Hinduism, and later on Islam. So you have multi-ethnic, multi-cultural, multi-religious people in these 2 billion people, and how to combine them together to be able to work.
The problem is Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam was all covered by socialism. We have to get out of that. That is our problem. Otherwise, the Buddhist, Hindus, and the Islam merchants who built it up. We were an open economy. We were the biggest traders. The traders wouldn't go across from India. Buddhism removed the prohibition on sea transport. When the traders became Buddhists, they came along. Then the Hindus went along. And you had a very open one. Then we went, thanks to Mr. Nehru, and turned it the other way around. Sir, Iqbal?
Thank you, sir, for coming to the Institute and for a wonderful presentation. You mentioned IORA and the difficulty of kind of creating cooperation in the Indian Ocean region. And I think that to some extent it's a question also of where you draw the boundaries of the region, because we discussed a lot about Bay of Bengal, India, Sri Lanka, and so on. But I mean, where are the borders of the region? Because in many ways, one can say that one of the reasons why IORA doesn't work so well is that there are too many members, and it's very, very difficult to cooperate between them. So in a certain sense, my question is, if you have to promote some type of institutional cooperation, how can you effectively decide who's in, who's out? Because otherwise it will become very kind of geopolitically manipulated, and it will be very difficult to produce any effective maritime governance or cooperation. Thank you.
I mean, all of us recognize Indian Ocean begins in South Africa and comes all the way down to Perth. Historically, we've been trading, I would say, from where Mozambique is until Indonesia. That's recognized. It doesn't prevent them. Africa has a strong African Union. I don't know. My own issue of IORA's biggest weakness was it had no heads of government meeting. We only met at ministerial level. So we had only one heads of government meeting in 2017. So let IORA meet at the ministers level. This is why we are suggesting we discussed that the central secretariat should basically beef up a heads of government meeting. And how it will take some time, but then how many members are there in the European Union? So we are just a few more than that. African Union has, but we have to have a better machinery if you have to go ahead. At one time, the heads of government used to meet. Even now, you go to the Commonwealth heads of government, most of them are there. Britain has now lost its interest, so I don't know what the future will be. But remember that's one with the East Africans we meet regularly in our case. Partly also because we play cricket, addition to tea. So there are a lot of cultural links. There's nobody to gel it together. That's where if you look at RCEP, the heads of government means. So we haven't got that mechanism working. If we had that mechanism working, we wouldn't have all these issues. And that's what we have to move towards.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation. I'm Avnish, the representative of the Confederation of Indian Industry. Thank you for your engagements with CII all over the years. But I ask this question more as a geopolitical observer. We have had in the past couple of weeks, the Indian Navy has publicly stated that they are very much capable of going against Pakistan in their briefing of Operation Sindoor. Yesterday, our defense minister on a CII platform also said that POJK and the people in POJK want to come back to India. But in all of this, I wanted to ask, what is your opinion of and the role that the Indian Navy could play in the region? Because the Navy's view, and of course in India and the strategic committee's view, is that India is the security guarantor in the region. 30% of India's trade flows through the Malacca Strait, so Indian Navy can come in anytime, whenever there's an issue over there as well. How do you see the role of the Indian Navy playing out in the next 10-15 years?
No, Indian Navy is the largest navy in the Indian Ocean, and that's a recognized fact. It'll be there. What exactly is the net security provider? For instance, in regard to certainly maritime disasters, others natural disasters, yes, and to a certain extent to getting together and working together on patrolling the high seas, but Indian Ocean is too big for a single navy to dominate. But within it, India as the largest navy has to get that recognition. But what you are seeing now is also a build-up that is taking place of other navies. UAE is building up its navy. The other issue that you have is that Pakistan is also building up something like 8 submarines and 4 frigates. So those are issues that have to be, that type of arms race must stop in the area. Otherwise it's difficult, but you have to look after Bay of Bengal, you have to look after the Arabian Sea, and then come down into the main sea routes. Another one that can develop later, that's going to be where it is, if China goes ahead with the Dar es Salaam to Angola rail track, then a lot of it will come from Bay of Bengal into that area, opening up a area which is not in any way petrol at the moment. There's nothing to work out there. South Africa can look at the Mozambique Channel, but that will also open up another area. So that's why I say it's much better, because you, again, how much of resources can you put into building up the armed forces, any of our countries? That's one of the issues. And you have a lot more to build up on your Air Force, so that's a lot of, that's the row between the Navy and the Air Force, who gets the money. But certainly, at the end of the day, there has to be some agreement. But I don't think the Chinese will come in a big way. This is a you, and if there's, that's why I said earlier, I see the Chinese strategy is more of getting together with all the countries, the littoral countries. Other than having a conflict over Taiwan, there's nothing else for them to. So it's really coming into some agreement where finally there will be some organized, maybe Aura itself, where India's role is recognized. How much of a role Australia will play in the Indian Ocean, I don't know, though they are getting these submarines to be more for the Pacific. The Americans have asked. But we will finally have to sort things out ourselves. What has happened so far, which is a very important one, is when the piracy took place in the Red Sea, our navies couldn't handle it. So you had to go to the UN and get the Europeans and these even Japanese, Chinese, Koreans, all came in on this. So this is another area. And what is concerning Sri Lanka is the drugs trade, the amount of drugs that come in into the Arabian Sea, and then it gets transported. How do we tackle it? So this is one issue, that we didn't have the navies to handle it. So most of the navies are there in East Africa, and we have to come to some agreement as far as the sea is concerned.
What is the potential for a common currency for the South Asian, East and South Asian region, as well as for crypto?
Crypto hasn't been that much, it hasn't got a favorable reception so far in the areas, partly also because of revenue considerations. I think we'd like to have the currency within our borders so that we could collect the money. It'll all depend on what ASEAN, China and others do. And without that, I can't see any movement in our areas. But for us, revenue is a big issue for India, for Sri Lanka, for Pakistan, for Bangladesh. Revenue is a big issue. So we'd like to have the currency being controlled by us within our borders.
I noticed SARC has not been mentioned today. I think that's quite indicative of the fate of SARC. So, I know we're running out of time, but just one very quick, maybe just a comment or a question. Climate change is another issue that these countries will have to.
No, it's a big one, and that I forgot about. The Himalayas became very important because most of our rivers come from there. Take Indus on one side, Ganges and the Brahmaputra, then Salween on this side, and finally Irrawaddy, one of the tributaries come from there. So that is affecting us. It's also affecting Nepal and the climate. the whole economy can get changed. The same with Bhutan. And when the water level rises, that will create problems on the Indian and your sides. Also, the fact is, as far as ASEAN is concerned, remember that Mekong also comes from there. So, in both ways, both ASEAN and South Asia are getting affected by the Himalayas. Then China has these plans of building the dams there, which is being resisted by the other countries. And that's one issue on which I think ASEAN, BIMSTEC, SAARC, I don't know, Pakistan will have to come into that. And China must call for a meeting, I think separately. We must have a meeting on Himalayas, which even affects Maldives when the water level goes. Little bit is enough to affect. And my mine is that there should be the ASEAN countries, the South Asians, and China has to sit down together and talk that over. We may have to have a separate organization on or a committee, standing committee on the Himalayas. It's too important.
What is the latest on the Pakistan-India river dispute?
It's still being held in abeyance.
So that was the only successful deal on the rivers.
Yes, from 1960.
All the rivers have become a problem. Even Bangladesh, it's a big.
That is one of the reasons that Bangladesh and India cannot cooperate.
And it's regional politics as well as state level politics.
So you don't cooperate and the water goes to the sea.
On that ominous note. Thank you, Mr. Wickremesinghe, for sharing your thoughts, but also the very engaging engagement with the questions. And you've left us with answers, but you've also left us with a number of questions that I think all of us need to grapple with. So please join me in thanking Mr. Wickremesinghe for sharing his time. And as I mentioned, that this is our first engagement.
Yes, I think we should have more.
We need to do more.
Yeah.
And we look forward to more collaborations.